examples of everyday art were executed to be thrown away, or in some instances, they are hopelessly rare, because if you brought this flyer to the door of the venue, you would get $1 off the cover price. Here is a list handwritten by Curtis Sherrod, Maxi Ray, at the age of 16 or 17, outlining how to distribute the show flyers. Who would bring flyers to what high schools in order to distribute them by hand to make it know that the event was actually on. And here is a photograph by Joe Conzo, a print that he made at the age of 17 years old, with notations in his hand that you made and you brought to pass out to people at the actual show. The book we put together is not, it was never an attempt to create a definitive work on the history of hip-hop. But when myself and Joe and Wiz and Bambara started working on this, one of the things that we were talking about was how do you create an immersion in the art form? How do you make something where people who weren't a part of it, who weren't the insiders, people who maybe weren't born with it, people like me who were on the other side of the Atlantic in like a dark little cave with an elf as a neighbor, provide some sort of visceral experience of this. You know, something that you can sort of sink into in order to get a sense of this time. That was our thoughts when we put this book together. Because one thing that has happened over the course of the last 10 years, which is really, really important, is that more and more books are coming out, and more first-hand narratives, like Disco Wiz's masterful first-person account of these events. It's just begun. Books like that are starting to appear now. Serious academic scholarly work, and I'm saying that in like the nicest possible way. You know, not writers like Jeff Chang, who is completely averse to the mere idea of naval studies, who writes with an eloquence and a brisk ease about, you know, the social, economical, and political connotations of this era and how it has brought us to what constitutes 2009. These things are happening slowly and steadily, and it's where the Cornell Hip Hop Archive fits, and where it is such a joy to slowly but steadily see that archive take on a life of its own. In October of 2008, we put together a symposium. It was a great success. It was attended by, I think, over 1,000 people. And it was students, it was scholars, it was people from all over the United States. Catherine touched upon the curriculum that is starting to happen around this as well. And little branches are, you know, starting to go this way, that way. On occasion, I have been traveling in America with Jeff Chang, and we've been doing workshops on campuses. And the Cornell Archive, which has started to grow exponentially. We got a donation about a year ago of approximately 14,000 pieces of CD and vinyl and photography and press kits from Los Angeles-based record executive Jeffrey Weiss. We got donated the photo archive from Source Magazine, and there are other things that are starting to join here, which means that as an apparatus is created for this archive, as it is being digitized, as it is being presented on the cornell.edu website, it can actually reach people far beyond the campus as well through this online activity. And it's fascinating. And the last 2 summers, my son, Sam, and my coworker, Gabriel, have spent time up at Cornell working on the archive. And I'm going to invite the 2 of them up for just a moment to talk a little about how you create an apparatus for scholarly work surrounding this. So, Gabriel and Keith, Sam, you'll work with you.
Hi. So myself and Gabriel had the undertaking of figuring out how to take all these sound files, all these photos, all these flyers, and logically organizing them so people like you can see them and learn and understand the fantastic history that we're being presented with today. And essentially we did that through sort of dividing everything to have to do with music and everything have to do with culture right down the middle, and then trying to organize them in a way so we could relate sound files to photos, to flyers, and match these together. And obviously this is, fairly substantial of an undertaking, and it's very difficult to do. But myself and Gabriel, we were here at the beginning, and we were figuring how to sort of start this setup and see how we could build off of it from there. So when we get these new donations from other people and we see these other archives popping up, how we could fit these archives into sort of what we have now.
So there are a lot of organizational problems with this material, and part of that is, if I can say this as politely as possible, Johan is not the most organized guy. And one of my challenges is to try to get everything organized and then keep it organized. So when everything arrived at Cornell, it was a bit of a mess, and the job of the librarian is to bring order out of chaos. Part of that problem with this particular material is that things aren't necessarily self-describing. The photos don't all have captions saying who everyone is. So one of the tasks that I undertook before we actually went up there to organize this was to sit down with Joe Conzo and actually go through and say, okay, who is this in this picture? Where did you take this? And get addresses, names of clubs, everything we could, just so we could have as much of that information available to researchers as we could. With the flyers, things aren't necessarily as they appear because people would be listed on there as invited guests, which meant they wanted them to show up, but it doesn't mean they actually were there and didn't want to. We wanted to get a list of, we wanted to include in the information that we were gathering the names of the concert promoters, but sometimes those were just kind of, somebody would make up a name and say, oh, this is who's organizing this event, but it was just kind of an off-the-cuff thing that didn't actually carry through historically. But we reported the information anyway in hopes that some researcher might be able to track that down someday and find it all out. But really our goal here was to get as much information as we could down that would be useful to future researchers and organize it in a manner that would be logical for them. So, Joe Conzo has photos of hip-hop shows, and he has photos of just life in the South Bronx. So we kind of split things down the middle that way and split them up so that you get kind of both sides of the picture there. I think what we ended up doing was hopefully very useful to researchers, and the finding aid and other additional information is all available on the library website. And hopefully I think things are in the works to get as much of the material that's digitized available on the website as well, so that those gears are turning.
Thank you, Sam and Gabriel. I'm almost ridiculously proud, and he's heading off for his tutor right now, so we'll see you in a second. One thing that I'd like to mention is how I came to Cornell, and how I came to meet Catherine and Anne, and how it came to be that Ithaca ended up being the home for a Bronx archive. A couple of times I've gotten the question, why isn't it in the Bronx? Why isn't it in New York City? And the answer to that can be a really short one, which I'm going to try first, and then it's going to be a slightly longer one. The short one is that New York has never been good at showing love for New York. It's just never been the case. The long one is that I spent around a year